call to order this meeting of Stillwater Area Public Schools, District 834, for Thursday, September 9th. Joan, can you please call the roll?
Director Hockert?
Here.
Director Atkin?
Here.
Director Porbeni? Director Riley?
Here.
Director Sherman?
Here.
Chair Petrie?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to go into closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 13D.05, Subdivision 3B, to engage in discussions with legal counsel regarding pending litigation in the matter of Metropolitan Transportation Network, Inc. versus ISD 834 et al., court file number 82-CV-21-3627. Director Sherman, is there a second? Director Onken? Thank you. Do we need to take a roll call vote on this? I think so. Yep, okay. Joan, can you call that roll, please?
Well, actually, you just need motion by member to adjourn. Yes. Director Hockert?
Yes.
Director Onken?
Yes.
Director Porbeni? Director Riley?
Yes.
Director Sherman?
Yes.
Chair Petrie?
Yes,
You have a quorum.
thank you. Okay, we are back in session after our closed meeting. The next item on our agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. The next item on our agenda is the district mission statement.
The mission of Stillwater Area Public Schools in partnership with students, family, and community is to develop curious individuals who are active and engaged leaders in an ever-changing world by challenging all students as they travel along their personalized learning pathways.
Thank you. And the school board goals.
In partnership with community, parents, and students, the School Board of Stillwater Area Public Schools ensures excellence in education by increasing student achievement for all students, securing long-term financial stability of the district, and increasing community trust and engagement.
Thank you. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? Director Onken, is there a second? Director Sherman? All those in favor of approving the agenda, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. The next item on our agenda is the Superintendent Report.
Thank you, Chair Petrie and Board Directors. Stillwater Area High School student Kulshjay Singhvi has been named to the prestigious Top 300 Broadcom Masters list. It's the nation's premier STEM competition for middle school students. Singhvi was recognized for his science fair project, D-Predict, an artificial intelligence model to predict the likelihood of early diabetes. He developed an artificial intelligence model based on behavioral and physical attributes. Singhvi's model was able to predict prediabetes with greater than 98% accuracy, which is remarkable given that published work had not surpassed 85% accuracy. It was written in the Python programming language, which he learned at Stillwater Middle School. Singhvi is one of just 4 Minnesota students who made the list. 30 finalists will be chosen next week to compete for more than $100,000 in awards and prizes. And I know my oldest son loves programming and would love to meet this young man. Congratulations to that. Next, Minnesota Alliance with Youth is pleased to announce that Ava Roots of Woodbury has been selected to serve on the Minnesota Youth Council representing Minnesota Congressional District 4. The Minnesota Youth Council, or MYC, is a collaborative of youth leaders that mobilizes their fellow middle and high school peers across the state to create equitable systems through youth-led outreach, education, and advocacy. Members of the MYC are change agents in their communities and across the state, leading the way with youth-centered systems change. And I'd like to, at some point, to maybe invite these students to one of the board meetings to acknowledge them. Congratulations to the Stillwater FFA chapter for earning a Grand Champion Award and Blue Ribbon in the FFA Landscape Design and Construction Competition at the Minnesota State Fair. Stillwater FFA members designed and constructed the display to meet the theme of Native Minnesota Gardens. Plant and hardscape materials for the project were donated by Abrahamson Nurseries and Rose Floral of Stillwater. The display earned its Blue Ribbon and Grand Champion status by best meeting the criteria in the following areas: principles of design, elements of design, landscape construction, selection and quality of plant specimens, correct and clear labeling, and signs and accessories and lighting. So congratulations to our Stillwater FFA. Next, just for a clarification, because this has been a change, I want to make sure that the community and our school board understands this. We have a Brookview expansion hollow core concrete planks. We are putting them forward because it's already been approved by the school board, the contract, even though it's over 50,000, because 721.1, that policy has been revoked. So we just want to make sure that this is explained a couple of times before we move things forward. It's important to bid out the planks separately to get them ordered and here on time. And the amount includes the tax, and this will be taken off as we are tax exempt. It's essentially our district that is getting in line for the distributions, so we will have them in time. for construction and should be prepared in February. The total bid is $146,280 less tax and came from Mullen, and the other two bids were higher at $157,000 and $282,000. This project, again, was already approved by the board through the Brookview Expansion Lease Levy, and just want to remind everyone that this is the reason that it's going through. And finally, a reminder that we'll be hosting our Pony Homecoming Carnival on Friday, September 24th from 4:30 p.m. to 6:30 p.m. And we'll have games, activities, and a lot of fun. So please consider joining us that evening before the big homecoming game. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Lansfeld. Next item on our agenda is open forum. Those who wish to speak to the school board will be able to do so in the beginning of the board meeting during open forum. You must sign up to speak. You may sign up only for yourself, not for other individuals or groups. Due to time limitations, we will limit the number of speakers to 15, who may speak for 3 minutes each. If you spoke at the last meeting, please consider allowing others to sign up before you. When your name is called, please approach the podium and state your name and address, including town, before you begin your remarks. Please pay attention to the timer, who will hold up cards indicating when you are approaching the end of your time. When time is called, you may finish your sentence. After you address the board, please leave the podium. Stillwater Area Public Schools, District 834, welcomes input from citizens as community involvement on the issues facing our district fosters better decision-making and improved learning experiences for all students. While comments and questions are welcome during open forum, law prohibits the board from discussing concerns about individual employees or students in a public meeting. We will stop the proceedings immediately if employee or student privacy issues are raised and direct the speaker to forward comments regarding individual employees or students to the superintendent. We welcome discussion of the issues, but will not tolerate the targeting of individual staff or students by name, position, or implication. Because we are modeling civil discourse for our community, speakers must present their testimony in a respectful manner. Vulgarity, character attacks, or malice will not be tolerated. The board will not deliberate, discuss, or engage in conversation with speakers during open forum. However, the board may ask administration to review the concerns presented. Our first speaker tonight is Lisa Williams.
Lisa Williams, I'm a Lakeland resident. I wasn't going to say anything this evening because I've stood up here on several occasions angry, and all of my words fall on deaf ears. But I thought after I got here and no one signed up, I'm going to share my week with you. So I took my child out of the high school, not going to put her through discrimination with masks and vaccines. And we were all set to start our school week, homeschooling. And then the phone call came on Monday, the second one this summer, of a friend of hers who took her life. So our school week has been difficult, and we're going to awake tomorrow morning. So while you all sit here with your mass theatrics, pretending you're medical professionals, telling us what we have to do or not do with our own children, shame on you all, because another life was lost this weekend. Another teenager who wasn't allowed to be in school for 18 months. Another teenager who suffered anxiety. Another teenager who wasn't educated. So while you all sit here and pretend that you are better than the rest of us and that you have the right to tell us what to do with our children, shame on you, because you're responsible for another one being gone, not having any opportunity. Shame on all of you. You're not medical professions. You have no business telling us what to do with our children. So as these things keep coming up, I'm going to bring them to you. I'm going to let you know every time another child took their life, every time another child came home and cried because they had to wear a mask all day, or because they didn't have to wear a mask, but their friend did, because their friend was vaccinated. All the bullying that goes on to these children from staff, this board, the superintendent. You're responsible for those deaths because you made the decisions.
Jim Franklin.
Let me first say, Madam, I'm sorry for your loss. My name is Jim Franklin in West Lakeland Township. Good evening, Board Chair Petrie, board members, Superintendent Lansfeld. I would like to comment tonight on the positive aspects of our district. My children recently graduated from the district. In that time, the staff and principals found the strength and the weaknesses of both my children and how to best promote their learning and social development. Thank you. My kids made friends and created memories that I will always be grateful for. When I overhear my kids and their friends talk now, it's comforting to hear their memories and laughters and positive comments about their most influential teachers. I understand kids are back in school. Teachers are going out of their way to provide a positive and welcome environment for all children. Community members are joining together to carpool in this time of a transportation shortage. Working families are being accommodated with early openings and delayed closings. Staff is working longer hours to make this possible. This is the Pony community. Everyone coming together to provide our students with the best possible experience in and out of school. Pony pride is alive and well. You're all first-term board directors voted in by the community. The superintendent and administrative team all have about a year experience in their respective positions. This would be a difficult time at best for most seasoned board and administration. I encourage directors to trust one another and work together to serve our community. The community who by and large supports our schools, supports you all. The community gets nowhere when we are stuck blaming each other over challenges. We should never use these adult disagreements and differences of opinion to take away our children's learning and life opportunities. We as a community need to set our district up for success so we can continue serving our students coming through our schools over the next 10 years. This is why I enthusiastically support the replacement levy and tech levy. This crucial local funding will support educational resources for our youth. I have served on the Community Budget Committee, and cutting $12 million annually will not fix anything. It will not teach anybody a lesson. It will only hurt our kids. It will rob our children's chances for a full and rich pre-K through 21 experience. I look forward to voting in the upcoming weeks. My family owes this district so much, and it's my desire to pay it forward and provide these experiences to future students. Lead with positivity and kindness. Ignore those who spin everything negatively. I refuse to believe that negativity represents community sentiment. Focus on setting a leadership example that can inspire and make us all proud to be ponies. Thank you for your efforts during this difficult time. Again, thank you.
Dee Armstrong.
Dee Armstrong, Afton, Minnesota. So originally I had a plan. I was going to come and I had all these things written out. It was really awesome. It was really going to be good. The highlight of it was going to be talking about this mafia movie where I saw where the mob boss walks into this bar and he says, "Mighty nice bar here. Be a shame if something happened to it," which is basically what y'all are saying about this levy. Be a shame if something happened to it. You aren't giving us anything new. You're just saying, oh, we're going to cut 100 teachers, which is 20% of teachers because we have 545 teachers in the district. And you're telling us that 10% of the budget goes to 20% of the teachers. So there's a little bit of a weird mathy stuff going on there. And maybe it's Common Core math, and I don't know. But then I got to thinking about it, and then this sign came up about signing up electronically, and it really got me thinking about the issue of trust. Because in the board announcement at the very beginning, you say that the goal is increasing community trust and engagement. And here's the problem. There's at least half this community that doesn't trust the stuff that's coming out of here. They don't trust what you're saying. They don't trust what you're doing. And so by saying, oh, we're going to do it electronically, frankly, I don't trust that if I sign up, that you're going to let me speak. You're going to say, oh, sorry, you were number 16. Oh, you weren't on time. Ah, dang it, Dee Dee, you just don't get to speak. Which is pretty much voter suppression, because you know I'm going to be talking about how I don't support your levy. So that's voter suppression. I got a problem with that. I also got a problem because I carry around this little, it's the United States Constitution, and it says that the people have the right to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So I am petitioning you right now, telling you that I have a problem with your change in your electronic things. I have a lot of other stuff that I got redressy issues with, my grievances that I want to redress with you, but mainly, I don't trust you. I don't support your levy. I don't like extortion, and I'm kind of tired of the games y'all play.
Catherine Hobbs.
Good evening, Catherine Hobbs, Stillwater South Hill. I didn't really write a speech or anything, but I know you guys are super busy with the busing crisis, but I just thought I'd bring this up again. I'm just concerned that a teacher ordered this book, Transforming Ethnic Studies in School Curriculum, Pedagogy, and Research. And I know a lot of people are saying, well, this book isn't going to actually be in class with the students, but there's some extremely concerning things in this book, and I don't know how we can have any assurance that the teacher isn't going to use any of this in their construction of the curriculum and the way they talk to the children. So I'd just like to read a few things from here. Ethnic studies can be framed as part of a broader process of decolonization or delinking that leads to decolonial epistemic shift and brings to the foreground other epistemologies, other principles of knowledge and understanding, and consequently other economy, other politics, other ethics. Ethnic studies is not just a constellation of education projects, rather it's a set of political projects and emergent movements. It navigates a tension between liberation movements and colonial capitalist institutions. I know the social studies standards mentions racial capitalism, which is a term coined in the book Black Marxism. I don't know how that's going to be taught either. Then, so critical thought is where you seek knowledge. Critical pedagogy is where you look through a critical lens to see the power structures and then dismantle them. Theory is critical to the extent that it seeks human emancipation. Criticality, a stance that seeks knowledge that helps liberate people from oppressive circumstances. So it questions unjust power relations. It probes into the foundations of racism, its everyday workings with capitalism, colonialism, heteropatriarchy. Ethnic studies explicitly helps young people recognize and analyze racism for the purpose of challenging it and working towards racial justice. I mean, this book basically looks upon students as activists. It says, it looks upon students, they will be apprenticed into becoming advocates, social activists, organizers, and movement builders. And this book talks about a whole bunch of stuff, like it identifies critical race theory as a framework to understand and analyze the multiple identities and knowledges of people of color without essentializing their various experiences. I mean, so all this stuff is in here, and it's extremely political, and I'm very concerned about that. And I beg of you, you know, I have no trust. They say trust the people in power. I mean, you know, trust the people with the knowledge, the teachers, to construct the curriculum, but I don't trust them to do that. So please, do the job you vowed to do and check their curriculum. Thank you.
Amy Martin?
Hello, Amy Martin. I live in Lakeland. Thanks for the opportunity to have a voice tonight. At the core of our responsibilities is to create a physically safe environment for our students. Unfortunately, the district has engaged in a legal contract that leases school property to a commercial business that will put thousands of students and teachers in the direct line of a device that emits untested radiation. Many people dismiss alarming information because honestly, it would be a lot easier to just ignore the problem. But our kids matter too much for me to remain silent or inactive on this issue. If you don't know what a 5G tower is, just go drive by Oakland Middle School and you'll see a big one. You can't miss it. So there's just 3 things I want all the listeners to know today. Number 1 is there's over 11,000 pages of reputable scientific evidence that tie 5G technology to cancer, oxidative and DNA damage, sleep disturbances, disrupted immune function, negative impact on brain function, and the list goes on for literally 11,000 pages. I'm calling on all community members to step up and force appropriate action to protect our kids. Our children are not available for unproven experimental technology. Second thing I want you to know is the space lease to Verizon follows all FCC regulations. Great. The FCC is designed to protect the telecommunications companies. They do not protect children or families. Don't believe me? Go research this yourself. Last month, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. District ruled that the FCC failed to provide a reasoned explanation for its determination that its 1996 radio frequency emission guidelines, which are the guidelines regarding the safety of 5G and wireless technology, adequately protect the public from harmful effects from exposure to this radiation. Therefore, the court ruled that the FCC decision is capricious, arbitrary, not evidence-based, and in violation of the Administrative Procedures Act. The court remanded, which basically means returned the decision to the FCC and ordered the FCC to re-examine its health and safety guidelines for wireless-based technologies and 5G. Now, what does that mean? It's a huge decision. The court's decision has changed the current status quo and has major legal implications. Essentially, what this decision means is that until the FCC provides a review of the evidence regarding non-cancer wireless harms in a way that complies with the requirements of the law, respectfully, Superintendent Lansfeld, the FCC guidelines no longer can be presented as an assurance of safety for harms. Third thing I want you to know is that there are other affordable and reasonable options for safely offering communities data connectivity. Fiber optic is one of them. Today, I'm urging the board to begin applying pressure to their lease agreement and to begin exploring the legal options we have to halt any further plans for more 5G and other cell towers, the removal of existing structures on school property until they are proven safe, and finally, sharing a public statement that reflects the true science and risks associated with being in close proximity to 5G. The legal fact is they are not proven to be safe, and the community deserves to know this. Thank you.
Carl Blondin.
Thank you, Chair Petrie, members of the board, Superintendent Lansfeld. First, I want to say that I'm very impressed with the job that this district's attorneys have done on the MTN lawsuit. I've reviewed the pleadings. I'm an attorney myself. And I think the taxpayers should be very pleased with the job done with your attorneys. Pay their invoice immediately. They're doing a good job. The main reason I came here tonight to speak was to address issues of civil rights. About a year and a half ago, something more than a dozen young women addressed this school board. They were young women of color at Stillwater Area High School. You could hear the fear and frustration in their voices. And what prompted me is over the last month or two, we've had people come here complaining about critical race theory. Well, I want every child in this district to know, if you are a student of color, I believe you if you say you have experienced discrimination and racism. I want every parent of a student of color in this district to know, I believe your children. I've spoken to teachers and administrators, they believe your children. Civil rights and fighting racism must always be your number one priority. Until that is done, until you provide a fair and equitable environment, education is not possible. I believe our students. I do not believe these complaining George Wallace wannabes. Finally, I support the upcoming levy. It is very important. A large cut will disproportionately impact the number of teachers. The reason is we have to pay for buses, we have to pay the electricity. There are many things we have to pay for. Adding the teachers to have reasonably sized classrooms is important. Without that levy, we will not have it. I want to close with some words from probably the greatest Christian writer of the 20th century, Alexander Solzhenitsyn. The line separating good and evil passes not through states, nor between classes, nor between political parties either, but right through every human heart. No matter who we are in this district, what our religion, our political party, our social and economic status, let's find the good in our hearts to pass this levy to provide opportunities for all of our children. Thank you, Madam Chair. Carl Blondin, Stillwater, Minnesota.
Peggy Franklin.
Hi, I'm Peggy Franklin. I live in West Lakeland. Good evening, board and Ms. Superintendent Lansfeld and administration. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you, as I know that you have many important decisions and issues in front of you. My request is very simple and could be resolved easily, quickly, and without any cost. Just in time for families who are seeking new back-to-school activities. I am advocating for the school district to return allowing Cub Scout packs and Scout troops a presence within the schools and on Stillwater School District informational sites. As a longtime volunteer for Scouting, currently the Bayport Troop 113, I can attest that just a few years ago, Scouts and other youth organizations were encouraged to participate in back-to-school events. We could post information in schools and send flyers home in Friday folders. The decision to eliminate posting of out-of-school events likely occurred when the district changed to electronic information delivery. All school and District 834 information began being emailed to parents via weekly school newsletters. All activities outside of the school district's purview were relegated to emails from Peach Jar, a digital communication tool. Peach Jar charges approximately $500 to set up a basic account, and with cost increases depending on the number of ads run. This is not something a volunteer organization can easily afford, thus limiting their exposure and access. It is incumbent on us to find a better means to notify families of all that is available to them in our vibrant community. Perhaps just separate emails to apprise families of nearby events and groups. Unintended and detrimental consequences for families and community groups occur without information available. For example, the isolation during the COVID crisis when parents were seeking social outlets for their children. Scouting remained a safe activity with modifications as mandated. Weekly meetings and monthly campouts continued. During lockdown, they continued via Zoom. Perhaps other local organizations were able to function this way as well. COVID did not stop us, but kids and families were deprived participation just because they lacked awareness. District 834 espouses community engagement, District 834 espouses engagement and opportunity within Stillwater schools. The community is an extension of that. The purpose of Scouts and most other school-age groups is to collaborate with schools in promoting extracurricular activities and education for youth, all with the goal of shaping a better future and well-rounded citizens. I ask you to please help us be recognized and seen within the context of Stillwater Schools. Thank you.
Pam Carlson.
Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela Carlson, and I'm from West Lakeland Township. Good evening, Chair Petrie. I was about to say Melinda, Superintendent, the board, and all the staff. I'm here tonight to really just tell you that we support the levy. Our family supports the levy. We're going to vote yes. My ponies are all graduated. They're off in colleges and graduate schools. And they're keeping in touch with what's going on back here. They have filled out the paperwork to do the absentee ballots because it's so important to support the schools that we have here. Education has always been really important in our family. If you actually, my grandmother, 5 generations back in London, she completed the Florence Nightingale School of Nursing, moved over here, got married, and with each successive generation, we've learned the importance of education. It's really just integral to what we do. When I talk to my kids and we reflect back on their time being a pony, Anderson Elementary, fantastic experience. Donna Williams, they loved her. My gosh, she had accountability, she set expectations, all with fun in mind. I mean, they loved going to her class every day. Roxy, Mark Schweitz, they learned how to fill out a job application, go to Leo's and be servers. I still have pictures of that. That was a wonderful time. They have Mr. D's tie, Superman tie. My son took that out to graduate school and he's actually had Mr. D sign it. So all those things built my kids and created the life that they have today. It was so fundamental in their education. The Scout project, she was just talking about Scouts. It brought back to mind my younger son. What did he choose for his Eagle project? Was to go out and collect school books to bring back to Anderson Elementary so they'd have a better library system. My older son, when he was in, I think it was 9th or 10th grade, they said, take what you would do with a math career. And he picked medical physics. I didn't even know what it was. So I'm going to read a little bit, if I can, of what he did. So this was his first shot at writing a little bit of an essay for a class in high school. We only have one shot in life, one shot to make it our own, one shot to make a change in this world. I intend to make that shot count. So what do you want to do when you grow up? Take all those experiences, because this is what I'm asked. I want to be a medical physicist so I can help. I want to be a man who has a wealth full of knowledge to bring healing and renewed life to those who are suffering. So those are the ponies. And thank you for that. And thank you for everything. And we will vote yes for the levy. Thank you.
Jessica Johnson.
Jessica Johnson, Oaks Street, Stillwater. I'd first like to say that I'm standing here in hopes that children once again can have that type of experience in the public school system. It sounds serene. I was recently reminded of the illegality of the mask wearing in a public place. I am a law enforcement graduate and referenced the Black's Law Dictionary just today to confirm what I believed to be true previously, and that is that a Minnesota statute 609.735, concealing identity, makes it a misdemeanor for a person whose identity is concealed in a public place by means of a robe, mask, or other disguise, unless it's based on a religious belief, incidental to amusement. I'm not sure they mean this type of theater, or entertainment, or protection from the weather or medical treatment. And doing so, again, is a misdemeanor offense. So being this is a public place, and unless you have said exemption, it is my understanding that you're in violation of this statute, and therefore should be at a minimum warned by law enforcement that you're committing a crime. I have withdrawn my children, my younger children from the school district, and thanks, buddy. With the exception of my high school student who isn't required to wear a mask, but I do speak on behalf of the children in the community that I care deeply for that are being forced to conceal their face and apparently commit a crime. I do want to just read an excerpt from the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons that was published in April of 2021. And this is a quote. The desire of certain human beings to conquer the world and to mold other humans to conform to their will began at the dawn of history. In Aristotle's time, the worst possible form of government was tyranny, defined as the rule of one person or of a small group of people in their own interest and according to their will. Pandemic fears have led people to embrace a 2,000-year-old discovery that forcing people to cover their nose and mouth broke their will and began to delete their individuality. As AAPS past president Lee Hybe Merritt, MD, points out, rituals of the old religion, Satanism, involve wearing masks, washing hands, and standing in a circle 6 feet apart. Masks are traditional occult symbols of obedience, submission, and transformation, as French philosopher Emmanuel Levinas theorized, that human relationship and responsibility spring from an epiphany that occurs primarily in the face-to-face encounter. We dehumanize the enemy by seeing him as faceless.
That concludes open forum for tonight. I just want to address something that one of the members, one of the speakers said. We have had a full group of people speak to us for the last couple of meetings. And we actually had some people in the community ask us about our policies in regard to open forum. And in our policy working group a couple of weeks ago, we decided to take a look at what sort of policies that we have that refer to open forum. And we actually found 4 different policies that refer to open forum, and some of them are in conflict. So what we are going to do going forward, the policy working group is going to take a look at those policies. We're going to try to resolve those conflicts. We're going to take a look at best practices. We're going to take a look at what other districts are doing when it comes to open forum. And if you have any suggestions as to what you think we should be doing with open forum, please let Director Hockert know, because she is the chair of the policy working group. In the meantime, we are going to be switching from a paper-based system to an online sign-up. And the online sign-up will be open beginning at 9 a.m. on Monday, just before the Thursday meeting, and it will close at 4 p.m. on Wednesday, the day before the meeting. And then those who signed up, and it's a first-come, first-served basis, just like it is right now, you'll be notified the following morning on Thursday that you are welcome to come speak to us that evening.
Are we going to be able to see if we actually got signed
You will be notified. You will be notified if you were one of the first.
If I sign up on Monday, am I going to be seeing on Monday I'm number 1, or number 2, or number 8?
Nope, you will be notified that you are one of the people who signed up.
Transparency. Transparency.
Enough. Thank you very much. Thank you. Open forum is done. Thank you very much. The other thing that I would just like to say is that open forum is not the only way to speak to us. And we, thank you. we received like hundreds of emails about masks, and we have 15 people, who come to speak to us in person. I take into account all of the information that I get. That is enough. Thank you very much. We're trying to carry on a business meeting here.
Just don't lie. You're addressing us. You're actually impacting our ability. We are your.
So I would appreciate it if, I love to get emails and I read them. So if you would like to get in touch with us, please email. I just appreciate everyone who takes the time to email us or to come and speak to us in person. I appreciate your involvement in our community. So we're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the consent agenda. Is there a motion? Director Onken?
Can I pull something from the consent agenda?
Yes. What would you like to pull?
I would like to pull item B, disbursement register.
Okay. Any other items to pull, Director Riley?
I would like to speak to item B after Director Onken is finished.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have item A, minutes of the August 26th meeting. C, student desk and chair replacement. D, Stillwater FFA field trip approval form. E, human resources personnel report. Can I get a motion to approve these items?
I'll move.
Director Hockert, is there a second? Director Sherman, all those in favor of these items, please raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right. Director Onken, disbursements.
So I'm going to go to something that I typed up here so I get all. So regarding disbursements, I'd like to make the board aware of a couple of things regarding some of the payouts listed on disbursement register as it pertains to the long-term facilities maintenance as well as Brookview expansion project. As you review the disbursement register, you will begin to see some larger payouts. I'll use the Meisinger Construction Company payout of $48,497.50 as an example. This specific payout was part of the long-term facilities maintenance summer projects that had previously been bid out, brought to the Finance and Ops Committee, and approved by the board. These payouts are partial for the work complete to date and within the approved bid. Before payout by the district, the disbursements are approved by both the architect, Wold in this case, and the general contractor, Kraus Anderson, and discussed with long-term facility maintenance staff to make sure they fit within the original bid by that specific company. All new contracts exceeding $50,000 still require board approval, which is still happening. We are simply not approving them a second time. So again, looking back at the Meisinger one, this is not a new contract. It was within the bids that were put forth for summer projects. To assure the board and community transparency, we have asked Mark Drummerhausen to periodically give updates on construction projects. In these reports, Mark will be able to show the board approved budgeted amount as well as specific costs to go over. I'm sorry, let me repeat that. Board approved budget amount as well as specific costs that may go over and costs that come in under budget. If the entire cost of a project will go over the board-approved budget, the long-term facilities maintenance group will need to come to the board for further approval. The community is welcome to listen into the finance and operations meetings as they are open to the public. They can also view the notes from the meetings, which are located at the end of the board packet. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Director Riley?
Thank you for that. In response to that, the community will not see these payouts because the disbursement register is not public, which I have been asking for. And is your agenda posted so community and board will know what is going to be on the agenda, because I don't have any idea what you're going to discuss. So 2 points. Again, I am asked, this board is asked, to submit questions 24 hours in advance in order to have my questions answered because you want to be prepared. And in response to me asking questions regarding these large, very, very large, long-term facilities maintenance contracts, I got zero response today. But I got a little short excerpt from you in your superintendent report, and then I get an explanation from you now. That's the respect I get in return for having to come to you a day in advance. Not cool. So if we want to go into this, I don't know how I am supposed to approve any of these contracts within our long-term facilities maintenance, right? They come to us as a check register in case those in the public don't know. We get, I don't know, maybe 50 to 100 pages of line items that say only what is the check is being written for. No real explanations. So I come and there's long-term facilities maintenance for this project. I don't know what that is necessarily. I don't know what the bid was. I don't know where we are in the project. I don't know if we should be paying this out or coming back for an approval of another contract. I know none of this. How am I supposed to approve these contracts without this knowledge? How is finance supposed to know whether or not they should write a check or bring forward a contract? In our own statute alone, 123B09, no contract shall be made or authorized except at a regular meeting of the board or at a special meeting at which all members are present, of which all members have had notice, okay? We have a few things. You're talking budgets. A budget is not a contract. Within those budgets, we have individual contracts. We have approved we had written our resolution, right? According to Minnesota Statute 123B.52 subdivision 2. Number 1 on there, right? We said $50,000. The board hereby authorizes superintendent and the director of finance to lease, purchase, and contract for goods and services that are within the budget the board has approved and do not exceed $50,000. Not or. Any proposed lease, purchase, or contract exceeding $50,000 must be submitted to the board for approval. Any proposed lease, purchase for contract for an item outside the board's approved budget must be submitted to the board for approval. Notwithstanding the delegation of authority in paragraph 1, the board retains the discretion and authority to review, approve, or reject any proposed lease, purchase, or contract before it is executed. So I've received 2, right, and in our board packets, 2 committee reports that you have laid out, August 17th, August 31st. August 17th, it states, it was discussed by the working group that since this was part of the budgeted Brookview Extension levy that it was approved by the entire board, contracts within the budget do not need to come to the Finance and Operation Committee for approval. Not true. According to what we have and what our statutes are, not true. They have already been approved. If they're approved and they're under the $50,000 at the $50,000 threshold, fine, if that contract has been approved. This is consistent with surrounding district practices. I don't care what every other district is doing. I've said that over and over again. We're here. Let's do it right here, okay? This entire project has cost overruns. If it has overruns, it's what you described already, right? We'll come back through. Yes, I agree. But the same process will be used for all projects that have been approved by the board. Here's my issue. Why do you think the committee has the authority to tell the district that this is how the procedure is to be run? You are a committee, you are not of the full board. You have no decision-making ability. And if that's what you're doing, you're violating open meeting law, right? You cannot You cannot make decisions like this in a committee. You're there for information. All right? So, also, there was a procedure put into place on October 8th of 1920, right? You wanted to, and I'm sure you were in agreement, and I don't know who is driving this. I'm not sure you're getting your feedback from or who you're getting feedback from, whether it's contractors or vendors or whether it's administration or other board members, I don't know. But on October 8th, we, the board, approved a procedure to put in place. You removed a policy, you did not remove the procedure. The procedure still stands. So I don't know why you think you can overrun this in a committee meeting. I'm so confused. In taxpayers, less and less transparent. You don't get to see, you do not get to see the disbursements. Now you're not even, we're not even talking about the projects and the total overall cost of projects. How do we know where we're at? We've been in this boat before, right? We've had issues with this. We are trying to fix this so you can get a levy. At this point, you're going backwards. You're becoming less transparent. You're discouraging conversations at the board table. You're limiting now, trying to shut down, conversations at the podium. I don't understand how you think this is in good practice, considering all of the statutes that are already in place. This is what is required by the law. This is what we are required to do. So can we please start doing it right? Please. I can't, my vote's a no. I cannot vote for disbursements where I don't know where we are. I just don't, and I think that's been a problem in the past. Now you have to remember, disbursements were not made available to the board until a few years ago. And when that happened, administration went a little, like they were concerned, like, why do you want to see disbursements? That's what our job is.
If you would like, we can, and I've talked about this before, we can come to a work session here, next month or whatever, and talk about the process of how this looks and how the disbursements are paid out. And so each one of these that you see, you just see the purchase order, but what goes into each one of them, there's one for each project. So you take Stillwater Middle, you take Stonebridge, you take the district-wide projects. There's kind of an overarching cover letter to say, okay, the overall bids were for X amount of dollars. Within each one of those, there are different work scopes within each one of the projects, whether it's carpentry or lighting or flooring or electrical or mechanical or whatever that looks like. Each one of those work scopes were bid out independently and then brought to the board, I don't know, March, April, whatever it was. And then so within each one of those payouts that it's paid at they have to get it to Krause Anderson, who's our professional service that oversees this by the 25th of every month. Then they go and say with each one of the contractors that their bid was X amount of dollars. Let's say their bid was $100,000. So Krause Anderson goes and looks and says, okay, here's what they want to pay for. They want a bid of this much. Let's see the work and the progress that they've done up to this point. So this is, 50% of what they're bidding out. Let's see the work that they've done. Are they 50% complete? Yes or no? Is the work being done that they should? And then if they agree and say, yep, it is, then they sign off on it. And we get the form that they've signed off on it. Then it goes to the Wold architect and they look at it and say, okay, is it 50% complete? Is it to the specs that were bid out? Are the materials that were used appropriately and all those sorts of things? They sign off on it. And then if both it's signed by the architect and signed by the construction manager that says, yep, this meets the standards and the specs that you hired us to do, then that comes to us here. And we can go into more detail if you want, how each one of this looks and kind of dig into it at a future work session. We're more than happy to see it. I understand where you're coming from, where you just see the back end of the payment of, pick a dollar amount, 16,000 and some change, where you just see that. You may not see the other end of the sign-offs and other people checking off on the work.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it. We've had this discussion. Unless I'm going to get this for every disbursement, it's not going to matter because it comes to me, right? Who is ultimately responsible? Right? We're all ultimately responsible. So we hold the brunt of the decisions in this district. And if we are not, and you are not, asking these questions, how can you even vote yourselves as board members to approve these things. If you don't know, I can't.
I don't know why.
Director Sherman.
I mean, I struggle because this is for disbursements, which is paying the bills for the work that's already done. We've approved the projects. It's within the budget. We approve the budget, we approve the contracted projects. I don't, short of, it would be unrealistic to have we can get 90 pages of disbursements. I mean, and it can go for anywhere from $5 to more, but they're all within projects we've already approved. So I guess we can have this conversation, I guess talk to Matt as the finance chair. I mean, we can try to work with this, but we have our policies, we're following the policies,
You're not following law.
But we are following it.
You're not. I mean, how am I supposed to vote on things if I don't know whether we're within the threshold? I am missing information. You're missing information.
I'm not missing information.
Okay.
So this is approval of
Let's raise our hands.
disbursements.
Director Porbeni.
Thank you, Chair Petrie. It's unfortunate that we have to go this route. I mean, it's really, really unfortunate. Like Director Sherman said, these are projects that have already been approved. We approved these projects, and now to pay and we knew what the amounts of those projects were, and now payout is a concern. These are things that we're all aware of in terms of what those projects are. And like Director Sherman said, if they have to bring all of those payments back to the table, because I'm trying to understand what law we're violating here, considering the fact that we're following the guidelines. So what exactly is the law that we're violating for projects that we've approved? And all they're doing is paying for work that has been done. So what is the law? I mean, I'd like to know. To understand what that law is.
I gave you the law.
No, you didn't. I didn't see no law.
Let's raise our hands. Let's raise our hands if we want to speak.
So if you can tell me what the law is, I'd sincerely appreciate that. Thank you.
Director Riley.
I've already listed the laws and the statutes that I suggest, if you want to meet up afterwards, we can have a little deeper conversation so you can understand better. My issue is I don't know where we're at. I want an overall. Give me an overall where we're at. You understand exactly what I'm saying. I don't know how I can approve something if I don't know if a contract needs to be brought forward for approval again instead. I don't know the answers to that. How do I know where we're at in these projects? I don't. And we've have a history of this. There has been issues in the past of this. It needs to be addressed. And you know what? And if other districts aren't addressing it, that's on them. But this is my watch.
So what if Director Drummerhausen comes in and presents to us, like we talked about in the last, would that help?
I just need to know where we're at. Before you can ask me to cut a check, I need to know if we fall within what we've approved and where we are. That's all I've asked for.
Can I jump?
All right.
Sure.
Can I jump in? At the
Director
last,
Drummerhausen.
At the last Finance and Ops, I brought an overall budget and then one for each project. So at the last, I don't know if it's in the minutes here or wherever it is, but there's kind of an overall for each project kind of broken down in its where it's at, and then over under for each project, and then broken down for each one. So you take Stillwater Middle, what the projected budget was on bid day, where we are right now, and then any variance above or below. And so based on all that information we have as of our last Finance and Ops meeting, we're coming in about $100,000 under budget based on that. And then so these disbursements are based on the overall budget that was shared at the last Finance and Ops meeting.
Okay, thank you. It looks to me like Superintendent Lansfeld.
Just real quick, regarding the disbursements, as soon as our audit is completed, we will be providing a summary of disbursements for the public.
A summary or the disbursements?
Not every single page, but categories. But it will be public, and we will be providing that as soon as the audit's completed.
So may I ask why?
Director Sherman.
As it was requested.
Director Sherman has her hand up.
That's not what I was asking.
I appreciate the discussion. I just want to understand, when we have disbursements that are coming in, it's for work already done.
Right.
So it feels it's for projects that we've already approved, and it's the work that the management of the district is doing. So we have approved a budget, they manage the work, they work with the contractors, and then we're approving it, and we see everything within the budget we've allocated and approved as a board. So I guess I'm just struggling, and I want to have a conversation, but at this point, I feel like this is to approve disbursements at
This
this
is
point.
regarding
But it's a good conversation. It's a good conversation.
And I do think that, I'm quite sure that Mr. Drummerhausen understands what it is that you're talking about, Director Riley, and I do feel like maybe we need to have more discussion about this and what kinds of information you might like to have. So I'd like to move on with the meeting and take this vote, but I do think that we need to have more discussion about that and see what we can do to satisfy your need for information.
Thank you. I do have a few issues with what's transpired according to statute, going on in committee and circumventing. That is a very big concern for me. And the lack of transparency or lessening of transparency is also a concern.
Okay, all right, so we are, I don't know that we have someone moved the disbursement register. Director Sherman?
So moved.
Is there a second? Director Corbini, all those in favor of approving the disbursement register, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to reports now. The first one on the, in reports is the back-to-school report.
Thank you, Chair Petrie, Board Director, Superintendent Lansfeld. We are just very ecstatic to have all of our students back in school. September 9th is today, but our students have been back in school at the secondary level since last week, and then our elementary students came back full-time on Monday. As we are looking at the first day in enrollment, the number of students that we have is 8,341. So what that looks like is 3,414 elementary students, 4,737 secondary students, and 190 early childhood special education students. This is a little bit higher than we had anticipated. As we look at just the K-12 plus enrollment, the fall of 2020, our official enrollment counts for last year was 8,102 students. When we looked at what was going on in the spring of 2021, on May 31st, we had 8,089 students in our K through 12 plus programs. And then as we look at just our first day counts, this is just the K-12 plus, so that's why this number is a little bit different than that 8,341. But we had 8,151 students. So what these numbers really are telling us is that we were anticipating a decrease of 154 students because we had 698 seniors graduate from our schools. And we had an incoming kindergarten class of 544 students, but we saw an increase. So we were expecting a decrease and we saw an increase. We have an increase of 49 students from last year. So this is exciting news for us. As we look at what happened on the first day by the numbers, food service, as you know, and you've heard multiple times, we do have free lunch for all of our students. And we had 978 breakfasts served, 4,532 lunches served. A lot of meals going out to our kiddos.
Can I?
Yep.
Just comment. There have been some questions about food and making sure that we have meals for our students. There have been some distribution lines with certain items, but I know at least at the high school there should be at least 12 different main choices. So we do have plenty of food at the schools. It just might not be exactly the choice that the students want at that time, but there should be multiple choices. And we just want to clear that up. Okay, so if any families have any questions about that, please contact us.
Thank you for that clarification. As we look at our school age care, we have 595 students enrolled in our school age care. We do have full programs, and those services are being utilized to the maximum capacity there. Just a reminder, we are still hiring for additional staff, looking for more people to help out with our school age care programs. And so that we can serve even more of our students before and after school care. Then we're looking at early childhood, and we had 327 preschoolers and 211 students in early childhood family education. So we're seeing a high number of students that we're able to serve on a daily basis as we're looking at coming back to school. And then we get to the next topic. Typically, this is just a number on a slide. This year, as we are all aware, we have had some significant disruptions in the transportation service that we're able to provide to our students. In a typical year, when we're doing this back-to-school report, what we would report out on is the number of students that are routed and transported to schools. At this time, we do know that some of our buses are not running, and we are not able to get all of our kids to school that are routed for those buses. And so what we're trying to do at this time is to focus all of our available drivers on routes based on priority. This takes a little bit of time in order for us to make these updates and make these changes. But what we will be doing moving forward is establishing priority routes for our students. We will need to set the first priority to meet our statutory requirements to transport students living 2 miles or further from schools, students with disabilities who require specialized transportation, and any others required by law to transport. From there, we'll be making a priority 2 list of students and routes, and these are students within 2 miles of a school and other students who do not have the statutory right to transportation. This is a very unfortunate time. This is not something that we would hope to do, but this is a emergency situation, and we are working to, again, at the minimum, meet those statutory requirements for transportation. Moving forward, our routers will be working on creating neighborhood hubs that will maximize efficiency of routes. This is to happen within the next couple of weeks. And so families can expect that there will be some additional changes to routes, and we will communicate that out to families as soon as possible. A couple of other items that we have been exploring further of how to address our transportation issues is we have been examining options to adjust school bell times, which might allow us to run multiple routes with the same bus. And at this time, we are still exploring this option. We have not drawn any conclusions yet on the ability for us to do this. We have also begun to explore transportation reimbursement for families who have been affected by this disruption, and more information to come as we move forward and continue to explore what are all of the ramifications of this option. On a happy note, we also want to thank the United Way of Washington County. We are very excited that our community has stepped forward and supported our students and their back-to-school needs. We had a 2021 Stuff the Bus campaign where $47,000 was raised for school supplies. And this is an increase of 46% from last year in 2020. Who did these supplies go to? 203 households received donations. From this, 464 students received donations. And in addition, 65 teachers were able to shop for supplies for their own classrooms. We have 53 teacher kits that were provided to Afton Lakeland and Anderson Elementary Schools. And to do all of this work, we had 394 volunteers participating in this wonderful campaign for assistance to our students and meeting their school supply needs. And with that, that is the end of our very short back-to-school update for now. We will come back to you with additional updates as it pertains to enrollment specifically. We will come back in October with our official enrollment report. But as of today, we have a very brief report just on those first day of school numbers.
Okay, thank you very much. I just have a very brief statement that I would like to read. Earlier this evening, the school board met in closed session with its attorneys in regard to the lawsuits that have arisen over our transportation issues. Because of this litigation, we are very constrained in what we can say about the circumstances surrounding our current transportation situation. Therefore, our conversations going forward are going to be focused on solutions for our current circumstances. The board would like to extend its deepest apologies to the parents who have been inconvenienced by the disruptions in busing. This is really the last thing that any of us wanted for the beginning of this school year, and we know it has upended your schedules and your lives. Please know that we are working hard to resolve the situation within the limits of what is legally possible. Know also that once your students arrive through our doors, they will receive the same warm welcome and excellent education that you have come to expect from Stillwater Area Public Schools. And the only other thing that I would add is that if any of you out there are at all interested in driving a bus, please apply. If we got enough drivers from our community to drive these school buses, it could resolve our situation. And you don't have to drive both morning and evening. You can just drive in the morning. You can sign up just to do extracurricular routes. There's a lot of flexibility there. So please consider that. That would go a long way toward helping our current situation.
So flexibility on the mask mandate for bus drivers?
Are there questions from the board members? Director Hockert.
Thank you, Chair Petrie, and thank you for that report. I'm pretty encouraged that our enrollment numbers have gone up. I wasn't expecting that by 49 students, so that's really encouraging news, and hopefully that will continue in that direction. Excuse me. My question is actually about the transportation update, and I see the prioritizing people who are students who are outside of that 2-mile radius of our schools. And I'm just curious if we have any indication if families within that 2-mile radius, is there any chance that they will be getting a bus, or should those families start to kind of mentally prepare to find other transportation at this point?
Yes, not at this time. That change will bring us maybe 9 more buses that we'll be able to use 2 miles and out, but that doesn't take care of our entire routing needs that we have right now. So hopefully, as Chair Petrie just encouraged people to apply, we need more bus drivers to fill those routes, and we just don't have a timeline on this right now.
Okay, thank you.
Director Riley.
Mine is over, back to the enrollment numbers, and maybe John, if you'd like to speak a little bit for the community so the community can kind of understand. We're at 81, 51 for K-12, and the difference just with pre-K and where that money goes versus the K-12, because I think that could be confusing for the community to understand.
It could be, as with any funding program, it can be a little bit confusing. Some of the pre-numbers, preschool numbers really are run through the community ed program. Community ed provides the support. And also, just so you know, each of our darling little children as they come to school have a book back on their back. And that's full of, hopefully, money. And as staff members look at that, I know they see the children and the care for them first, but they realize that each child that comes to the school brings resources to support their education. So I'm very excited about the numbers, because if you just take a look at 50 additional students that are gonna show up at $10,000 apiece, that's $500,000 for our school district. And that will take care of, smooth out the wrinkles a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Sherman?
This is more of a request, I would guess, for the official report that comes out. But, and I'm so pleased that we have some students coming back after the, really the huge losses that every district is dealing with from COVID. But I would love to see some pre-COVID, kind of COVID numbers. And when I was just out doing a little bit of research, I just want the community to understand that we lost probably, and every district, I mean, all districts had losses, about 318 students as a result of COVID. So yes, we did gain 49 kids back, and that is incredible, and it's gonna take time. I mean, every district is gonna take time to come back, but we're still down 269 students. So I guess I think it would be helpful for the board in the final presentation if we could maybe see the impacts of COVID. And then I was just noticing other numbers that stood out at me, and this is just a testament to the work our food service department does. They went from 426 breakfasts served to 978 in a year. I mean, that's something to really just be in awe of. And the same goes for lunches, from 3,797 to 44,532. So I just want to acknowledge our food service staff and the incredible work that they're doing with everything that they have going on. The other thing I wanted to ask, and then is do we have any information on COVID cases yet? I know this is the first year, first week for elementary, but in the secondary, maybe it's been 2 weeks now, so.
Yeah, I'll let Dr. Cherry speak to that, but just note that beginning tomorrow, we should have a COVID dashboard with just positive cases at each site, and that will be updated weekly.
Okay.
And so I think that'll help with communication on that. Do you have any?
I was just going to add that, and thank you, Superintendent Lansfeld, for that note. I don't have those numbers in front of me. I reviewed them earlier today. What it does look like, though, is we've had a number of cases already in our schools. We've been very fortunate at the high school where we have not had any positive cases in the high school yet. And at the secondary level overall, I believe we've only had a couple. We have had quite a few cases show up scattered across all of our elementary sites at this time.
Can I ask a follow-up on the dashboard?
Yes.
Is that going to be identified between staff and student cases, or is that just going to be all cases?
Thank you, Director Sherman, for that question. Last year, we did have it divided on our COVID dashboard between staff and students. We haven't reviewed that yet, but I believe we are just bringing back the COVID dashboard at this time. And we will only be reporting, one change to that, we will only be reporting the positive cases since we are not specifically quarantining students. We have very few close contacts that are being identified, especially because the number of cases at the elementary level do include students who are wearing masks. There's just not a lot of that going on, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for that report. And we will move on to the next item, which is the second policy reading. 212, School Board Member Development. Dr. Cherry.
Thank you, Board Petrie, members of the board, Superintendent Lansfeld. This is the policy School Board Member Development Policy 212. This is the second reading of this policy and the revisions, the proposed revisions to the policy. One item to note on the revisions since the last time is the update on Section 2B, where it reads, new school board members will receive a school board manual and an orientation provided by the superintendent and the school board chair. And that is the only difference between the first reading and the second reading. Another item of note is there is another similar policy on our books, Policy 201.12, which is called Board Development and Evaluation. When we come forward for the final reading on the School Board Member Development Policy 212, at that same time, we will be recommending the Policy 201.12 to be revoked. And so at this time, we are open to any additional comments, any additional suggestions for revisions of Policy 212.
Director Hockert.
Just wanted to give a quick update from last time. At Policy Working Group, we did spend a little bit of time discussing the board member feedback that we gathered for that new board member manual. So we have condensed it and given it over to the administration, who's going to be looking at it as well, so that we can start to build that manual for onboarding new board members. So that's in progress and should be completed hopefully in the next couple months or less, ideally.
Director Riley.
So does the manual something that the board, entire board gets to review?
If that is something that we would like to, sure, certainly. I can bring it back. Usually for procedures, that is up to the administration. We do the policy, and then traditionally, the administration is in charge of the procedures, but in certain cases, we certainly, and since we did have input for this, and since it's within the 200 series, it would be appropriate for the board to review these procedures.
That would be great. Anything else? Okay, we'll move on to the next item under reports, and that is Federal CARES funding update with Dr. Tyne.
Thank you, Board Chair, Directors, Superintendent. I know that each of you have been on the edge of your seat since you've received your packet to learn more about federal funding. So I'll try to make it as brief and entertaining as I possibly can. On the slide up on the front, you'll see the revenue that has been received from the federal government. And a lot of people think that there's just a check that shows up in the mail and then we decide what we're going to do. But there's a process involved and there's a tracking of each and every dollar that we receive for federal funding and guidelines on how those funds may be used. The finance code is helped to identify and track each expenditure. And you'll notice they run from 150 to 161. There's also funds available that are listed on the side. Those are the funds that have been allocated for Stillwater Public Schools. On the application status, it should really be plan application because each district has to submit a plan to the Department of Education. The Department of Education will take a look at it and give tentative approval for that. What happens after that is the district can take time to budget and set up a program on how they exactly want to spend the dollars so it can be tracked. And then the last column talks about the encumbrances. And you'll notice that there are some that are encumbered, some that haven't been. Those that have been encumbered are those that have been spent during the past fiscal year, 2021. The total amount of funds that we have available for the district from the CARES program are $5,712,961. Right below that, you'll see the amount of CARES funding for 2021 that's been spent is approximately $2.6 million. The amount of CARES funding that has been encumbered but not received, or has been set aside and not received, has been code 150 and 155, finance code. And what those funds have been earmarked for, the plan for, is to use with third-party vendors. As a administrative team, we've decided that we'd like to set those funds aside. They have not been spent. I want you to be aware of that. But they've been set aside to use for the summer programming, which I think Dr. Cherry brought to you earlier this year. And there's been $350,000 earmarked for that. But that has not been sent or drawn down. When any of the funds become available and approved and encumbered, we still have to go through the process of drawing them. And that's Lynn's job in the business office to draw those down. The last two amounts, fin codes, are 160 and 161. And that's ESSER 3. This is supposedly the final one. And we've received or been earmarked for $1,966,065. And that gives the total of $5,712,000. Now, I just want to mention to the board too, one of the reasons that we've postponed spending some of the CARES money is because I do believe the superintendent and the rest of the administrative team has given good advice in that we set aside the money in case something happens that's unforeseen. We do have the ability to postpone spending out a little bit. So if something unexpected would happen, like there might be something that we want to spend on transportation, or something that we might need for another program, or to improve reading, or technology, whatever those things may be, that funding would then be available. Next slide, please. There's been some concern, where is this money going and what is it going to be spent on? There is the finance code that describes each of the expenditures, and it also has a description of what that expense happens to be. And there's one for each dollar that has been spent out of the 2021 school year, and you'll notice it comes up to $2,620,069. On the next slide, it'll show the CARES funding that's been approved and encumbered but not received. And that's the governor's supplemental amount, that's $251,000. And the elementary secondary relief funds, $875,000 for $1,126,000. There's a note underneath that says $350,000 has been set aside for summer program, especially the reading program, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, thank you, Dr. Cherry. And then the CARES funding that's available but not approved, and we're going to be working on that the next few days. And there's also a webinar that's going to be on with some guidelines on expenditures. This is ESSER 3, and there's the first amount is $572,852, and that's for local education authority, and they're going to give us some guidelines, and that's got some flexibility in it. The SR3 learning in code Fund 161 really is for recovery activities, and that's for situations where to prepare for kids coming back to school, to make sure that we're picking up some of the holes and gaps that need to be taken care of. And then there's a total of the amount, and they tie out. I would like to mention one other thing on the next slide, and then I'll stand for questions. Some people have asked about, well, what did you do with all this money you received? So I thought it would be wise, one, to show what we've been doing with the money, but also to show how much we've received in comparison to our surrounding school districts. SR3 allocations, you'll see that Stillwater received $1,966,000, and I want to say up front that I believe we're all very grateful to receive that funding. But in comparison, South Washington County received just about $3 million, Hastings just about $3 million, White Bear about $6 million, and a district I'm very familiar with, which is very similar in size and makeup, received $13 million. North St. Paul, which is our neighbor, received $15 million in ESSER funds, and St. Paul received over $206 million in ESSER funds. So when you take a look at the students that we serve and the students at the other districts, I wish it was more. And my own personal belief is I think it should be more. But it tells the story of how the allocations are spread out. I'd be happy to stand for any questions you have.
Thank you. Director Sherman?
I just have, could you explain, and I'm sure you've covered this before, but why are we so low in comparison to some, I mean, is it free and reduced lunch? Is
Yeah,
it?
that's a big one. It's title money. And our title funding is not comparable to what other districts receive.
Oh.
So that's the big
Are
driver.
there any other factors that are
And
notable?
there might be some, I'd also say protected class students that are in there. Example, in Roseville, I know that the free and reduced there is probably closer to 60%, where here, I'd have to turn to somebody else because I'm not sure. I know it's quite a bit less than that.
Thank you. That was my question.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Director Parbini?
Thank you, Chair Petrie. So there's nothing we can do.
I wish there was
I
something.
know we're a rich district.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people here are very comfortable. We don't have the same issues like some of the other districts. But is there something else we can do to increase the amount that we get?
Not that I'm aware of. We can talk to our legislators, but really this is dealing at the federal level and the money flows down. The governor did give us a little news the other day where he increased the supplement for reductions in student population. And that is going to make a difference. And the levy just showed up today, by the way. And the levy amount really is going to make a difference for us. It'll provide an extra $500,000 for our district. And I'm looking forward to sharing the levy with you. It's going to be on the Finance Committee coming up, the best we can do. And I would encourage anybody who'd like to tune in, please do. Love to visit with you.
Just real quick, free and reduced, according to the Minnesota MDE report card, we're at 12.9% as a district.
Sorry, what's our percentage again?
12.9%.
Thank you.
Director Haggard?
Came up with another question for you. So I'm thinking big picture. How much of our actual COVID expenses that we've incurred over the last 18 months be covered by this amount of money that we've gotten in our ESSER funds? Do we have any idea? Like, are we going to come close to a wash, or are we going to be in the hole after COVID?
What we're looking at right now, the thing that the COVID funds do for us, they give some flexibility to us. And that means we can stretch out, we don't have to spend the money immediately. And so one of the reasons I think the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and the rest of the team decided to postpone those a little bit is to give some flexibility to us. There are some unknowns that are coming down the road. The referendum is one of them. We don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic. So there are some questions that need to be addressed. So we do have some time before we expend that money. We do have enough cash to cash flow it, okay? So this is kind of like something that we can use when for direct programming. But I remind people, this is a one-time dance that we're going to. So once it's gone, it's gone. So, and because of that, because we didn't spend it or use it in the previous year and use it to kind of reduce some expenditures elsewhere, we've spent some money out of the fund balance. Now, our expenditures right now, when I take a look at them, they're about exactly where we said they would be. And our revenue is about exactly where we thought. That's not the problem. The problem is where the expenditures happen, okay? So it really makes a difference. So that does affect the bottom line, so. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I could go into great detail, and I know you want me to, but I'm just going to resist.
I have a question about the ESSER 3 learning recovery activities, which is, funding that is coming but hasn't been allocated to anything yet. And I understand the whole idea about trying to keep something in reserve, but obviously that is for learning recovery.
Right.
So I am just wondering what sort of overarching plans you have for that fund of money, which is $393,000.
Could I give you an example of how that might work and why we want to keep the flexibility? And I've already talked to Dr. Cherry, and she's saying, hey, we've allocated some of the governor's money and some of the SR2 money. Maybe what we should do is take a look at using some of the SR3 for the reading program and use that now, and then use the governor's money and some other things for other programming that might be beneficial, because it's kind of earmarked for that. So it creates some flexibility that we wouldn't have if we just took it out and used it up as fast as we could. Does that make any, did I say?
Yeah. Dr. Cherry?
Got it. I just wanted to add a little bit more detail on the learning loss. So Fin Code 160 is what you're talking about. And there it is, that targeted approach. We have a significant need to fully fund our intervention program. So that's where we would like to support more of our literacy efforts. We also have some planned professional development to ensure that we are making progress in that area. We also need to add some additional supports to our child evaluations and supporting our MTSS program. So those are all very specific components of meeting the needs through learning loss. Also just wanted to make a note about the second ESSER 3 item, Fin 161, which is that larger pot of money. And that is where we have a lot more flexibility, but that is where we had intended to be able to fund the online learning program. So the board has already approved the funding for the additional teachers for semester 1, as well as the additional technology required to support that program. And so that's where those funds would be coming from.
Okay, thank you. Director Sherman?
I just want to, so the 393,213 for the recovery, that whatever you deem for the plan, that would then come to the board for approval, correct? Just like the online plan would, okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions on this? Okay, thank you very much for that report. Appreciate it. All right, we're going to move on to our next item, which is the attendance boundary guiding change. Mr. Grummerhauser.
Good evening, Chair Petrie, members of the board. This report here officially kicks off our attendance boundary committee process. Today, I'll be bringing a report forward on the draft guiding change document that will set the parameters for a boundary committee work. We'll be looking for approval on a guiding change document at our next meeting, September 23rd. After the guiding change document has been approved, the boundary committee will create new attendance boundaries for the 22-23 school year. So not this year, it'll be for next school year. And I just kind of want to give you a brief timeline of kind of what that committee process is going to look like. So once this is set, we are going to take our October 1st enrollment numbers. So during October, the boundary team will convene and they'll go over those numbers, they'll look at current boundaries, and they'll create some initial recommendations to take to the board and also out to the community. So in October, the boundary committee will make initial recommendations. Then in early to mid-November, the first board meeting in November at a work session will bring those initial recommendations to you, as well as hold 2 community conversations to get feedback not only from the school board, but also from the community as well. Once that is done, the boundary committee will reconvene. They will take a look at the initial recommendation. They will take a look at the feedback from the board and those community conversations and see what changes or adjustments that they would like to make in terms of a final boundary recommendation. And then at the last meeting in November, we'll bring a report for a final recommendation, and then looking for approval for the first meeting in December on a boundary, new attendance boundaries for the 2022-23 school year. The reason we want to try to get it done at our December meeting, so that will allow families who would like to open or alternately enroll their child for a different school for the 22-23 school year. That will give them time to complete those applications before the January 15th deadline for those open and alternate applications. So with that, I'm just going to go through the guiding change document, and it may get a little boring here, but I just want to kind of read through it so we start at the same spot and then be able to kind of ask questions or things that you want to add, tweak, delete, because ultimately this is kind of your document for us to move forward.
Can I just really quick? I just think it would be helpful for the community to understand these boundary changes were going to be happening last year. That was kind of what was earmarked to happen. And then with COVID, obviously, they got delayed. We weren't in buildings. And so that's why we're here today, just so that the community knows that it's been discussed and known about. But COVID kind of delayed the need for that. But thank you.
So it's kind of this set up in three different aspects. The left column is our current reality. The middle column is our desired results. And then the right side is our unacceptable means. So first, under our current reality, we have growth in the southern part of our district. There's overcrowding at Brookview and Lake Elmo elementary schools, overcrowding at Oakland Middle School. There's space available in the central and northern elementary schools and Stillwater Middle School. We have a feeder system to middle schools, which means we align each one of our elementary schools, all those students that go to that elementary school, or I shouldn't say that are in the attendance boundaries of that elementary school, then would feed into either Stillwater Middle or Oakland. There's not a school that is split. So everybody who's in the attendance area of an elementary school would then feed into a middle school. Currently, we bus for elementary, anybody who lives beyond a half mile. For secondary, it's beyond 1 mile. We do provide transportation to our non-public and charter schools. We do provide transportation to our open enrollment students at the nearest stop at the boundary. So if they live out in North St. Paul or Matamidi, they have to drive to the nearest attendance boundary for that school to get transportation. It's not from their home in those cities, it's to the nearest stop if there's space available on a bus for that particular school. And then we set aside classroom space for pre-K programming at all of our elementary schools. As we look to create new boundaries, our desired results would be to make decisions based on the best interests of all of our students, create a boundary plan that positions us for our current needs and tries to minimize future changes. We'd like to get feedback from various stakeholders, such as the school board, admin team, staff, and community groups, provide for safe and efficient transportation system within board policy and procedures, provide for efficient utilization of district facilities to enhance learning opportunities for all of our students, balance enrollment at our elementary schools, balance enrollment to middle school philosophy in both of our buildings. Alternate and open enroll students will be sent back to their designated attendance area to start the process at the elementary and the middle school levels. The one exception will be GATE, Amidas Unigos, and our special education site-based programs. Those students will stay at the specialized programs where they're currently at. We would like to keep the feeder system to our middle schools, and to the extent possible is to keep neighborhoods together. So this doesn't mean that students will be sent to their nearest home, but rather all students within a neighborhood will be sent to their same school. And then lastly, under unacceptable means, will not violate state laws, school board policy, or negotiated agreements. Will not violate the class size ratios for each grade level sections, and will not create racially isolated schools. So with that is the draft of our guiding change document, and I will open up for any questions, comments, or feedback that you may have.
Thank you very much. I just have a quick clarification. I'm not sure what it means to balance enrollment to middle school philosophy in both buildings.
Yeah, so currently they like to run about 10 sections per grade level in terms of creating the teams and the houses that they have. So to the extent possible is trying to balance our enrollment to meet that middle school philosophy and creating and keeping those teaming model together. So as we go through the process, we do have one of our elementary principals and some of our elementary staff there. So as we talk about moving neighborhoods and changing capacity sizes, that will be a conversation piece about how that adjusts or how that would impact their middle school philosophy delivery.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments on the guiding change document? Director Sherman.
Can you explain, because I know we've done these in boundary change processes before, the alternate and open enrollments that go back to their designated attendance area? Is that, I mean, do we look at, because there are children now who are alternate enrolling in other buildings. Do we
Correct.
make accommodations to maintain those alternate enrollments to the extent that we can, or how is that? How does that
So
process
to
work?
begin the process, and this is something we can do, we can keep them, but typically in years past, what we have done is we've sent everybody back to their home school. So for instance, if I live in the Stonebridge attendance area and I want to go to Afton Lakeland, I'm currently in Afton Lakeland, but now that I'm being sent back home, when we start this process, I'm not an Afton Lakeland student anymore, I'm considered a Stonebridge student. And the reason we do that is send everybody back home is as we move neighborhoods around and you move neighborhood 26 or neighborhood 35, if you keep open and alternate enrollment students at the building that they're currently at, and then when you move neighborhoods around, you've just prioritized those students that automatically get to stay in their school when you move neighborhoods around. So you move everybody back to where they are, and then you move neighborhoods around so that when the open and alt process comes by the January 15th deadline, everybody has an equal opportunity, equal access back to a designated school that they may wish to attend.
So just to follow up, because I want to make sure I understand this. So if I live in Lake Elmo and I'm alternate enrolling in Afton Lakeland, I get sent back for the process, right? So that everyone goes back and everything can be reallocated. I would have to then reapply for an alternate enrollment if I was a family already going there. I would have to
Correct.
reapply.
Correct.
Are those given priority? Are those children given priority who are already attending?
So those are our procedures. They would be on the same priority level as a student who is moved because their boundary is moved. So they're on the same level. So if I live in neighborhood 20, and neighborhood 20 is currently got moved out and an alternate got moved out, there's two students that currently attended that school that now got displaced either from an alternate or because their boundary says, nope, you no longer go to Lake Elmo, you're now going to school X. Those two students now have the same priority to get back in, whether you're alternately enrolled or your boundary moved. We're not creating a hierarchy of alternate takes precedence over somebody who actually physically lived in a boundary that is now moving, because now we're gonna have to take neighborhoods and move them from school to school. So everybody who got displaced, whether it's because your boundary neighborhood moved, or it's because you're an open or alternate enrollment, or anybody who got displaced
Right, I see
because
what
of
you're
that,
saying.
is on the same priority list to get enrollment back in. We're not prioritizing one over the other.
Right, but, okay, and then now I understand what you're saying. Okay, perfect.
Director Hockert.
Thank you. Just to refresh our memories, about how often does the district go through this process of boundary changes? And then along with that, looking at this guiding change document, is this similar or more different from the last time we went through these boundary changes? Or if you could speak to that.
So this is very similar to what we did in the last process we did it in the, was it 16, I think it was, for the start of the 17 school year was the last time we did it. So there's a few updates with just some things that have happened over the last 5 years, but a lot of the parameters are very similar to what we did before. In terms of the last time we did boundaries, I want to say it was 2012, I believe there was one, maybe 11, somewhere in that range, then 2017, and then now here back in 2021. So, it's been 5-6 years. Ideally, you'd like to set boundaries that are set for a while, but just with some of the growth and changes with some of our housing developments around have forced us to move boundaries around.
And Director Hockert, the last boundary change committee, it was 5 years was the goal to get these to last. To Mark's point, it was to get up to last 5 years.
Which I was going to follow up. Is that do we have a goal for how long these boundary changes will last? Was it another 5 years, or is that part of
Typically,
process?
you'd like to go through a cycle of an elementary student, so 5, 6 years would be the goal. In an ideal world, you'd like to keep them there, so families who move into specific areas know where their housing is going to be. But a true realistic goal is try to get 5, 6 years out to get through a life cycle of an elementary student, if possible.
Does that factor into the guiding principle document in any way, or is that kind
Yep,
of
so that's
higher?
number 2 under the desired result, is so what we would try to minimize future changes is kind of where that would get into.
Okay, thank you.
Director Perbani.
Thank you, Chair Petrie. I see here that you've indicated feedback from various stakeholders. Is it just feedback, or you will actively engage and involve the community in this venture?
So we will have, we'll come to the board here first. I think the first, like November 4th, I believe it is that Thursday, for a work session to kind of share the initial recommendations. Then the following week, we're going to take these out to community conversations, one at Stillwater Middle School, one at Oakland Middle School, where we'll do a short presentation of kind of what the committee's work was, the recommendations, kind of how they came to what it would be, and then allow the community time to provide us feedback of things that they like or things that they may want us to reconsider when we reconvene before the final proposal. So we will get school board feedback. We'll also get community feedback at those community
So
conversations.
you won't have a hard hoc committee to actually help you, support you in this process, or you're just going to get feedback? Is that what you're saying?
So as far as the committee goes, we do have representation from each one of our elementary schools and our middle schools. We have parents, we have community members, and we have staff that are all a part of that committee. So they're the ones helping us create that. And then that committee, we're going to take that work that they create and bring that out to the broader community to get their feedback, and then bring it back to the smaller group to say, okay, here's what we were thinking originally. Here's some of the themes we've heard from the school board and the conversations. Where do we want to go from here?
Thank you for that. I know the boundary changes are necessary with respect to overpopulation of the schools. How do you solve a problem without doing boundary changes in the future? Have we thought about that?
In terms of enrollment?
In terms of enrollment, yes. How do we
So-
solve these problems?
So part of it is looking at certain schools, maybe Brookview, maybe Lake Alamo as we boundary them, is not boundary them to 100%, is knowing there's going to be growth moving forward to create some space there. So as growth comes, that you know that it's coming so that you can allow for that future need. So you're not going to put them all the way up as to 100%. You may create a little buffer there to allow for some of that growth that you know may happen here in the next few years.
It's a short-term relief, though, isn't it? It would be a short-term thing, but in the long term, how can we solve these problems? Because the growth
I mean,
will
that's what we
always
try,
be-
like I said, we try to get through 5, 6 years. I mean, boundary changes are things that unfortunately districts go through as enrollment changes and, new housing developments come up and the population shifts around where there's need, there's changes in every district. So we try to minimize it as best we can and try to predict that. And that's where we're gonna do our best, but, there's no perfect boundary that we've come up with, because we've had the last few years, 5, 6 years, we've been in this same situation.
Director Riley.
Yeah, I think boundary changes are inevitable in any district. It's just part of how it goes. I mean, you have demographics, aging population, new people move in housing. It's kind of what every district has to go through. I don't think there's any way around it, but I like if we're, making the 5-year goal, to try to get somebody through elementary school, that's respectable.
I understand that. I'm just worried that we might have all of our schools, even with the shift, we might have all of our schools overpopulated, and that might impact the class size in the future. So, I mean, there's a lot of growth in our community. And we know there's more growth coming in, especially in area Lake Elmo, Woodbury, hopefully in the future, maybe somewhere, some Stillwater. But, so if we have all of our classrooms, if we have all of these classes, whether it's the north or south, overpopulated with kids, boundary change is not going to cut it. So what do we do then? So this is a future thing, but that's the question I'm asking.
And that's what kind of, we're here. So I just want to be clear, just because more students in a building does not mean the class sizes are any bigger. So the board sets class size ratios for K1, for 2-3, for 4-5, and then for 6 through 12 in secondary. As a staffing, as an admin team, when we allocate sections for teaching, we cannot go above that. So it doesn't matter if there's 700 kids in a building or 500 kids in a building, class size ratios have to stay the same. Now, the number of classrooms you have may change because the more kids you have using 28 classrooms versus 22. But in terms of the number of kids at the high school or at a middle school or at any given elementary school have to stay inside of the class size ratio parameters. So
I
that
get
doesn't
that.
change.
What if you don't have those extra classes? I get that if you have, just because you have more students doesn't mean the class sizes, but what if you don't have those extra classes for the number of kids in that building?
And that's kind of that's the trick of running boundaries, because it's not as easy of just moving kids. So you just move a neighborhood and say you move 100 kids from this school to that school, we'll actually take the next step of actually run the report then. I'll say, okay, if we were to actually run this as a school, how many sections does it give us based on the school board parameters? You know, is this 22 classrooms? Is this 25? And then does that fit in the capacity? And saying, oh, you know what, that's too close. We can't move this section here. We have to cross that off. Let's look at another one. And then so as you go through it, it's a big puzzle picture. And the reality is, any single move works. You can move any neighborhood to any school you want. It's what does the other dominoes look like for that move to work? So it's kind of shifting different puzzle pieces of what about this one, what about this one, and here, and then trying to come up with a solution. There isn't a perfect boundary. I mean, we're gonna come right here that unfortunately, we are not gonna make everybody happy in this process. There's gonna be quite a few people that are gonna be moved. We're trying to do this in the best way we can holistically from a district perspective.
Thank you.
Superintendent Lansfeld, did you have something you want to say?
Just real quick to speak to that. We do want to keep up on our demographic studies to try to predict where growth will be. Sometimes that's hard to do. I worked previously in Utah. We had a huge population growth that we had a difficult time keeping up with. One school we opened up with 8 sections of kindergarten, and 2 years later we had 16 sections and 22 portables at a brand new school. To alleviate some of that, they thought outside the box. There was extended day, year-round, portables, more bonds. So there's a lot of different options, but we want to use the space that we have right now.
Director Sherman?
I'm wondering, just listening to your timeline for the process, how, and I'd like to say, I mean, of course, the levy's going to pass and we're going to maintain the local funding that we currently receive. If the levy were not to pass, are we looking at how this document might change in a new reality? Because certainly that would change our reality. Like I'm thinking right off the bat, busing for a half mile and a mile, we might have to go. I mean, the board could be forced to make decisions like going to the state.
So taking the busing one singularly, so if you move that, that does not affect boundaries. It just affects who gets bused within a boundary. So we're still gonna have to make changes because some of our schools next year are hitting a tipping point, and that we're gonna need to make some shifts. So in terms of boundaries, does it shift a little bit? It probably is gonna have to stay the same of where it's at here. Like you're talking busing them from the other ones, but that probably doesn't have an impact on how.
So the levy
This
passing or
looks.
not would have no impact on this.
I mean, it may a little bit that we'd have to
Like,
readjust.
for example, I'm thinking, would we still be offering preschool in our school? I don't know are things, I guess I just am hoping that administration maybe is thinking, how does this process change or look, in the event of a worst case scenario?
And that's something the board and our admin team would have to look at.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would
and-
appreciate that,
And unfortunately, if this doesn't pass, class sizes will be bigger, even up to 10 more students per class.
Right.
In some cases, and so that would free up space. With classes, but there's a lot that goes into that.
I guess just some thinking through, like, wow, what if, and how that might change the look of this document, because there will be things that will change that would maybe not necessarily impact where you put the boundaries, but it could have an impact, I guess, on this process. And then, I mean, I have some little pieces of feedback that I can kind of share with you, but I also wanted to say, I would be great if we could get this all online when the process starts, because boundaries are such an important process for the community to be aware of, where we could just have the guiding change document, have the priority of attendance document, something that people can, notifications of the meetings and things like that, where there's a spot that they can engage.
I wanted to ask about the group. You had mentioned that you have representation in the committee from every school. About how many people is that? And do a lot of them have previous experience doing this? Because I know it's a tough assignment, and, it's certainly valuable to have someone who's gone through it before.
So we reached out to everybody who was on the boundary committee the last time in 2016. We're at about, off the top of my head, I'll ballpark 50% of the people, maybe 40% are back. And then if there's somebody that for whatever reason, sometimes some people want to participate, but their kid no longer fit in the elementary, they're not an elementary parent anymore, they're not a middle school parent anymore. And so then we reached out to those buildings to get a different representative for an elementary school or middle school parent or a teacher or whatever. So we're at about 19 people right now with teachers, with admin, transportation, elementary parents, middle school parents, all represented, that, coming together from their perspectives, but also looking at this as a whole boundary change for all of our district, because this will have an impact for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Director Corbini.
Thank you, Chair Petrie. Would you make sure that every school has representation and the community within those schools also have representation in terms of decision-making?
Yep, we have a parent rep from each one of our schools, both elementary and secondary right now. There's a parent rep, and then there's some staff, not from every school, but kind of spread out around the district to get that. So it's more, we do have a parent rep from every building.
Okay.
Not the high school, just elementary and middle school.
Director Sherman.
Would it be possible to share this document with some of the people that were on the last boundary change and just have them take a glance at it and provide any kind of red flag feedback, something that maybe we as a board would not be able to anticipate? I just think the more inclusive we can be upfront, they might immediately look at this and say, that's going to be a problem, or you need to take this out or add this in. I just think that might be helpful.
Director Hockert.
Thank you. For this committee, is there room for more people, or is it pretty much set?
It's pretty much set.
Okay.
Because it has a nice balance, a nice mix right now. And so if we were to add more, we want to make sure that it's equally balanced and you're not overloading one area over the other. You want to try to have equal representation from all around.
That certainly makes sense. And then in the past, is there ever a board role in the committee itself?
So we have, the last two times we had a board liaison, if that's something you wish to do, that was there, kind of more just, they were involved a little. I mean, they didn't really give their input or, because this is where they provide the input, but they were there to listen and occasionally answer questions or here or there, but just to kind of see how the process went and be able to speak to it when we bring presentations. So if that's something this board wants to have a person or two as kind of a liaison to that process, we'd be more than happy to include them.
Is that helpful to have a board member there, or?
Sure, it's always helpful.
Okay.
Okay, I would just put that out there then. If anyone on the board would like to volunteer to be a liaison, because it would be good to have a board member on the process to just sort of listen to what is happening and be able to report back to us. I think that would be useful. So, board members, if you are interested in being that liaison, please let me know. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Drummerhausen. Appreciate it, and good luck on that process.
Thank you.
I've heard it's kind of tough,
Yes, it's a tough one because there's going to be some tough emotions when this is done and people that have to move schools, and this is never an easy process.
You're right.
So I do want to acknowledge at the beginning that this is not going to be fun for everybody involved.
No, it's difficult, and thank you for doing that. Okay, we're going to move on to our final item of the night under reports, school board goals. And I wonder if we can bring this up on our screen here so that the, sorry, I know, I just threw you a curve. Just so that our audience members can see this too. So we've been working on our school board goals for a little while now. We had 2 sessions with a consultant to help us work through this. And we actually came up with 3 overarching goals, which are actually very similar to what we have had in the past. And then we needed to work on strategies and how we will measure success. And we actually got through the first two goals, which were increase student achievement for all students and secure long-term financial stability for the district. I think that we ended up with some consensus on the strategies and the measurement for both of those. I decided that we didn't need to have a third session with this consultant. And so actually what happened is that Vice Chair Sherman and I took a look at this and came up with some proposals that we put in here. And it was just, really just a starting point for discussion. If the board does not like any of these, that's great too. But we just were sort of thinking about what is on our plate, what can we actually achieve during a school year. And we also need to keep in mind that these are not district goals, these are school board goals. So these need to be something that we as a board can accomplish. And then what will happen after we set our school board goals is that Superintendent Lansfeld and her team will then work on district goals. And so I guess I would just open it up for any discussion. What do you think of the pieces in there under increased community trust and engagement?
Can I make just an addition to what you
Yes.
said? I just want to be clear that when we looked at that, we looked at the brainstorming notes.
We did, yes.
These came from, there were some pretty universal themes, I think, that you'll find in that third one. So again, we can discuss anything, but we just kind of took the major themes.
Right. Yes, we did look at the notes, and that this is kind of what we came up with. So any thoughts on this? Director Riley.
I have a couple. I'm not quite sure how the superintendent search would increase community trust and engagement. And I also would like somebody to elaborate on bullet point 2 on that section of what is meant by improved board collaboration and conduct.
Well, I think we put the superintendent search in there because what we were sort of assuming is that and typically that ends up being sort of a community process in a way. When I've been involved in superintendent searches in this district in the past, sometimes there is a company that's hired to do it. Sometimes it's done internally by the board itself. But then when they bring in candidates, there are several different ways that I mean, it's like a day-long thing, and members of the community, are invited to come and ask questions and things of that sort. So it is an opportunity to sort of include the community. It would also be something that would be done on the front end as well, where, we're trying to ask our community, what are we looking for in a superintendent at this moment in time? And so that's why we kind of thought that it fit in with the community trust and engagement. Because again, it's something that we will need to address, in the coming year.
Bullet point 2.
Number 2, we just thought that
came up, that was a theme that we
yeah,
saw in
that
the
was
notes,
kind of
but-
a theme that, there is probably, we have an opportunity to try to figure out how we can work better together as a team. And, we also were talking about completing the review and changes to Policy Series 200. And also part of that would be implementing board self-evaluation. If that isn't something that we want to set as a goal, we can take it out.
I wasn't sure what you meant by that, by how it was written, because it wasn't clear to me or clarified.
And we can tweak the wording.
I personally think that the way to increase community trust and engagement is actually transparency in these meetings is really where it should start.
Okay, Director Sherman.
I think the 200 series will help. And I just have a fundamental disagreement, and I respect your opinion. I think that we really do conduct in a transparent way. I know people may not always like the decisions that we make or agree with them, and I get that too. But I'm willing to, I think within that bullet point, improving the board collaboration and conduct, I think that we can get even better at that transparency. So, and because again, that's the most important thing a board does is work with to hiring a superintendent. So again, I think all of these areas help with that transparency, and that I don't disagree with you, so.
Sure, and I've just noticed less transparency over the course of the last several months, and so that's where I think making our meetings a little bit more, I mean, we talk about disbursements and contracts and all of these things, and it seems like we're moving away from that. And so if our meetings are more transparent, then the community knows what the business dealings are, and they're more willing to trust versus removing items.
We can see where that is.
Director Probani.
Thank you, Chair Petrie. I think the community is aware that we're quite transparent here, and there's nothing we've done. You know, a few people might not like it, that's fine, but I know a majority of our community know we've been very transparent. A lot of things we've put here, a lot of things we've said are things we just talked about.
Point of order,
So
Chair.
in terms of
Annie.
transparency, nobody
Point of
here-
order, point of order.
We are trying to carry on a business meeting here. If you would like to comment, it would be better off if you watched it on a screen, and then you can yell it at the screen all you want. But you are in the building with us, and we ask you to be respectful of the fact that we're carrying on a business meeting.
Thank
Roger
you, Chair
Probani.
Petrie. Appreciate that. So I think that we need to be really careful when we make accusations. If we want to talk about transparency, we all have records here. And so I think we need to be really, really careful. There's nothing this board has done that hasn't been transparent as long as I started in January. I don't know about your time, Director Riley, but I think we've always given the community what they want to hear, what they want to see. If you're worried about disbursements, I don't think any of them here is trying to steal taxpayers' money. And when you approve projects ahead of time, that's transparency. We were all collectively involved in approving those projects, and paying for those projects is
Point of
what has
order.
been done. Can I finish, please? That in itself is transparency. So I really don't understand what the accusations are in terms of, oh, you mentioned disbursements, what the accusations
of
are
order.
with respect to lack
What
of
is your
transparency.
point of order, Director Riley?
Can we be at the task of what we're doing here on school board goals, please?
That's exactly
I
what we're
think
doing.
that she was discussing that because you were raising questions about transparency.
I disagree. I
We
was
can
talking about
disagree,
becoming
but I was
transparent,
discussing
and
exactly
she
what
was-
we're
Okay,
talking
all right,
about in
all
terms
right.
of transparency.
Please. Okay, Director Hockert.
Thank you. One thing I'm noticing in all three of these goals is that we do have a lot of policy work that is going to be part of our activities as a board. And I completely wholeheartedly agree that it really is something that we should be focusing on in board governance, in that part of being, having our job as the board is to govern and have governance and oversight as our guiding principles. And I believe that some of the things that are being pointed to as a lack of transparency is more managerial. And in order for our board to function, we have to delegate authority appropriately to our superintendent and their team. So I do feel that the policy governance is getting us in the right direction and cleaning up our policies and making the expectations, board expectations for the administration is the work that we really should be doing. And I'm very happy to see that each one of these goals has policy work tied to it.
Director Sherman.
I think for me too, I agree with Director Hockert. I'm extremely happy to see the focus on policy as well as the most important task I think we have as a board this year, which is the process for the hiring of the superintendent. One thing I want to try to build in here, and I don't know if we can do it within this document, but it seems like when I've been a community member, the board establishes the goals, and then they don't revisit them. They don't touch base with the community, and so oftentimes they go undone, or priorities change. I mean, I want this to be the kind of document that obviously can be flexible and change depending on the situation changes, but that doesn't happen if we don't kind of bring it quarterly or something back to the community, back to the board, to really discuss, are we on track? Are we meeting our goals? Do we need to make a change? Because again, otherwise, what I've seen in the past is it becomes a piece of paper that the goals don't get accomplished.
Director Onken?
We're not voting on this tonight, correct?
Not tonight, no.
So can we just continue to give you feedback? Or when is this going to come up for a vote?
It would come up for a vote at our next meeting. So I guess what I'm looking for tonight is, are there any suggestions to make changes before this comes up for a vote at our next meeting? Okay, well, I think that maybe what we can do then, if board members would like to think about this a little bit more, we will have discussion before we take action at the next meeting. So if any of these need to be eliminated or changed, you can always get back in touch with me by email, and, we can have that further discussion then at our next board meeting.
Chair.
Director Sherman?
If the feedback you receive is extensive, is that something you would consider maybe not having action then and moving it to another report, or are you?
If the feedback is extensive, we may have to have another report. But I do know that there is really a certain amount of urgency with this because, as I mentioned earlier, the district takes these goals that we set for ourselves, and then they need to sort of dovetail with what the district goals are. And we're already into the start of the school year, and there's a certain amount of urgency to get this done. And we're the first piece of that puzzle. So I really would like to get this moving forward at the next meeting if we can. Director Riley.
Can I just read something? This is kind of what I had read when we originally brought the policy in, that Director Hockert was referring to what a governance operating model, main function, organize operational, financial, risk management, and reporting processes so that the board receives the information it needs to put good governance into practice. The framework that I was trying to give as an example helps to bridge the gap between the governance framework and operations. The governance operating model defines the mechanisms and interactions through which governance is put into action, an important tool for boards to enhance their oversight capabilities while enabling management to implement governance initiatives. So the procedures applies how the board members receive the information, which is very much a part of governance. And governance does refer to oversight and decision-making related to the strategic direction. So the financial planning and the set of the policies all go into the school's purpose, values, and structure, so that it is a part of all of it. It's not just the policy in and of itself.
Okay, thank you for that. Anyone else have anything else to add to this? Okay, we will bring this back at our next meeting then. Thank you for that. The next item on the agenda is the board chair report. I have nothing for tonight, and that means that we are adjourned.